Greetings, folks. Philip Bateman here from Bravo Charlie. It's my great pleasure to be speaking with Mr. Marco Lambertini. Doctor, maybe?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
But Dr. Marco
No.
Lambertini, who's the convener of the Nature Positive movement. And we're here at the Global Nature Positive Summit. So I dare say you've had quite a bit of support, or at least people turn around and say, we should be doing something about this. And if I could just start off with, could you define nature positive for me?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for this conversation. To put it super simply, first, nature positive means more nature, no less. A future where we stop the decline of nature, we support the recovery of nature, and at the end of the day, we have more nature, no less. More forests, more fish in the ocean and rivers, more pollinators in the countryside, more worms in the soil, more biodiversity overall.
Yeah.
So that's the principle of nature positive. We've been losing nature for a long time, but particularly in the last 70 years, we had seen a steep exponential decrease of nature, and we want to halt that decline and reverse it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the decade, have more nature than we had at the start, and start a recovery process and journey.
And I feel like for people who have been watching my content for a while, I've taken you to like the Impact Forum in Spain and the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, who are growing startups and businesses at the bottom end of the scale who want to affect nature, but it's always been sort of climate related. And I think a lot of people at home may be sitting there going, even business leaders who are turning up each day, growing their companies, are like, aren't we already fixing the climate? What is nature? How does nature fit into this?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, nature is a much more intuitive concept, but when it comes to actually understand the impact of the loss of nature, of the decline of nature, it's much harder to feel it personally. So climate, you feel it sensorially, you feel it, it's too hot, it's too dry, it's too wet.
There's a hurricane coming
the damage that climate change is generating, hundreds of billions per year globally. Yeah. So it's extremely real, extremely material, and extremely personal. When it comes to nature, the impact is much more diffuse and much more silent and invisible, distant. It's distant sensorially, it's distant sometimes geographically, and it's distant intellectually, because you go to a fish market in most parts of the world, fish is still on the market. You open your window if you live in a city or in the countryside, you see birds flying around. What we don't realize is that the amount of fish on the market that is local versus imported has decreased dramatically. So what you don't realize is that the birds that fly in the countryside are a fraction of the ones that were flying in the countryside only a few decades ago. So biodiversity decline is much more difficult to perceive, and particularly the impacts. But we know they were heading towards very dangerous tipping points in ecological systems, Earth system in general, but ecological system, ecosystem functions, that once they reach a tipping point, will begin to provide, to stop providing credible, important services that we depend on. Think about pollination, think about water regulation of forests. So all that, unfortunately, will happen if we don't take now preventative action.
Yeah.
And this is not what humans are particularly good at, prevention. We react to threats when they're straight at us. And so now we need to make an effort really to internalize that we can't take nature for granted any longer. We need to start investing in halting and reversing nature loss in a nature positive future.
I find it fascinating where you did say that thing about humans being short-termists and our reaction to pain.
That's what we are.
Because, I've sort of been walking around doing this stuff for about 15 years in this vein, and you obviously a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And people weren't having these conversations. We were like, where are all the bees? But they weren't turning around at institutional levels and saying, how can we actually mobilize capital? How can we create change? And this might seem like a foreign concept to you, but in some ways, when you're at work and you put something in the trash, or you pour a toxic chemical down the drain, or you see a whole lot of waste that isn't being circularly economically considered, you can turn around to your employer and say, what are we doing? How do we change that? You can ask these questions of yourself, because I think humans, we put our hands on things and we can feel it. And you said...
and food.
Yeah. You said we value nature only when it's dead.
Yeah, we value nature only when it's dead, because we take nature for granted. And when a tree is standing in a forest, we consider it a beautiful, nice thing, but we never consider the incredible services it provides to keep the soil intact from erosion, regulating water flows that guarantee access and good quality water downstream, the oxygen they produce, the carbon they sequester, all that stuff has no value.
Yeah.
Today is living nature is almost all living nature is economically invisible, unaccounted for. And that's a fundamental problem, because when it comes to then deforesting an area to grow a crop, it is an economic no-brainer. By growing a crop, you generate wealth and income. By protecting the forest, you don't.
In my lifetime, all my transformative experiences about what it means to be a human have happened in nature. When I've gone out to the forest, when I've danced against a tree for days without food or water, the sun, moon dance, and gone out into these wonderful Australiana, and essentially, all my friends, we talk about bringing ourselves back to the core of our humanity by going to nature. But then it is hard to exist in nature when we're there. We need our tents, we need our supplies. As a human, I don't exist in nature. I have to live in an abstract sense. And I wonder about grappling with that tension of like, how do we actually, because I want a pizza and I want double glazing and I want to be warm.
Look, there is a tension because living in nature is hard. And that's why there is a reason why we have created this, as you call it, an artificial reality. We live in houses, not anymore in hut or under the trees. We produce food in a way which is not anymore directly generated from nature, but it's cultivated, it's farmed, it's modified. So there is a reason. It's because living in nature is hard. And for the majority of the life history of humanity, we've been dealing with scarcity of food, malnutrition, famine, diseases, and it was tough.
Yeah.
So our cultural cognitive revolution first, and then the technological revolution afterwards, has allowed us to separate ourselves from the negative elements of nature. But in doing so, we also have impacted the positive elements of nature, the ones that actually sustained us from the beginning, will continue to sustain us to the end. So that's where we need to understand that, yes, it's fine to order a pizza, to live in a flat. Of course, you don't want to go back to huts in the forest. It's not the narrative. But on the other hand, we need to also understand that forest where we used to live in is still fundamental for us to continue to live in a city and in the modern world. So we are, yes, separated by nature, but only virtually. The real connection, the real dependency is still there.
And so for the people who, like I'm the Nature Repair Working Group with the Responsible Investing Association of Australia and things like this, for institutional capital or for even just businesses who want to do something about this, how do they bridge that gap to, okay, well, here's the thing I can do. Here's where does nature stop as a constraint? Or is it like a consideration we should be overlaying to our already intense set of metrics by which we measure things?
Well, look, first of all, I think the business case for nature conservation is becoming clearer and clearer on a number of fronts. First of all, the whole economy depends on nature provisions, either in terms of resources, raw materials, or in terms of services, mitigation of climate, extreme events, water supply, and all the rest. So protecting nature is about de-risking your business. And in the short term, for some businesses directly now, for other businesses perhaps a little bit more.
Well, Australia's just introduced mandatory climate reporting for our largest emitters, so they're actually going to look across their supply chain, which I think will be a useful thing.
So that's the first element of the business case for nature conservation. Second element, of course, is that there is also a growing demand for business to do good about nature as well as climate from the consumers. And so you acquire recognition and competitive advantage.
So regulatory frameworks.
And then the regulatory frameworks are coming in that creates legal risks on top of material and reputation. So there is a number of reasons why there is now a growing solid business case. But there is another dimension that also is, because the easy entry point for business in dealing with nature is looking at de-risking your own business, because that's what you do as a business all the time, financially, socially, politically, and in this case, environmentally. But there is also another dimension, because business generates also externalities that affect society as a whole. So a business has the interest to de-risk their own operations or supply chains, whatever.
The survivability of that
community. The community. And then there is a responsibility about not generating externalities that are paid by society. By the way, business leaders, employees are part of the society. So everybody at the end of the day is going to be affected if nature collapses.
I've never actually met like this sort of amorphous, horrible business owner who's out to torch the countryside. They're actually deeply inspired people who take on the work of uplifting their communities and employing their people and things.
And the economic model that we are now criticizing and has delivered a lot of good for humanity. I mean, if you look at the state of just 100 years ago, at the start of the 20th century, child mortality rate, extreme poverty levels, life expectancies, they were kind of, now is a fraction of all that. We have improved that. So there's never been better time for humans today. But that may begin to change when we lose the support of nature. And actually, it will change.
Because we've engineered in wicked problems such as soil degradation into an industrialized food system. But who would have known 100 years ago when they were just like, if you fertilize, you can feed the people. You can feed the masses of people moving to the cities.
When I was born, my mother was spraying DDT in my room to kill the mosquitoes.
But you had no mosquitoes, so you didn't die from malaria.
We didn't have the knowledge that was actually a toxic chemical. So now the difference is that we know a lot more. We know about the impacts, we know about the consequences. Honestly, we know what needs to change.
We can measure it, we can map it.
Measure and map it, but the question is, the system is so cementified and too many people are still profiting a lot from the current system without thinking of when the system will actually begin to collapse. And the question is the usual. Do we want to really wait for the crash point? Or do we want to actually take preventative measures? And this is another big problem with humanity. Humans, not only humans, any animal on the planet.
Can we be smart monkeys? Can we be smart monkeys?
We think we are smart monkeys. We're just monkeys.
But can we be smart monkeys? We think we can be smart monkeys, but can we be smart monkeys? One last thing. What's the inflection point for you where you believe nature positive as a movement will have gained sufficient traction to be viable? Because I believe you have a consultation paper open for another month. So
this is about metrics. This is about metrics, about how to measure nature, because measuring nature, state of nature, is fundamental to know whether we are achieving a nature positive, net positive. Because what I didn't say before, I said the simple part, more nature, less nature. But nature positive is a measurable goal. It's not a slogan. It's a measurable goal, means halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 on a 2020 baseline. That's the official definition that was endorsed by the Convention on Biological Diversity of the UN. And so it's measurable, and basically is a net positive biodiversity outcome. Net positive biodiversity, more nature. On climate is net zero. On nature is net positive, because we want more nature, not same level of today.
Net zero, I don't believe is actually useful. I think we need to get to real zero, so then we can, because just having an offset where you are in balance with the externalities that you're destroying still doesn't bring us to a point where we can have net positive, nature positive, because of the impact of that externalities.
Of course.
I mean, we saw a report, like I think this week, where the Australian government is spending something like $23 billion a year propping up things that destroy nature versus 0.7%. Those numbers are accurate.
No. 2.6 trillions of harmful subsidies from governments. And then on top of that, 5 to 6 trillion of direct private investment. This is three times the amount of money that we are spending for armaments, arms, weapons, basically to fight with each other in the world. We're spending 3 times more to fight nature. I mean, it's like
completely insane. It's actually ecocide.
It's a complete paradox, and that's where the hope is. It's such a paradox that at some point we realize.
So what would be your ask of people out there watching this?
My ask is to try to actually, so don't underestimate the power of individuals. Because I think I convinced that, we talk about policy here, about a lot of stuff, legislation, systemic change. But at the end of the day, if society, and society is made of people, if society doesn't want to change won't happen.
Yeah.
So if we want to change and we translate that willingness to change into the way we consume, the way we produce, the way we waste, shouldn't, and the way we vote. And I'm not making a political campaign here, but just vote for governments that are serious about transition towards sustainable future.
Yeah.
Then things will change.
Yeah. One of the other panelists mentioned that when a solution is locally led, it's locally spread. And if you're working in an industry or a role where you don't feel fulfilled and you think, hey, I'm not contributing to the world I want to live in, change. Get in touch with me. There's so many websites that can direct you into working with people at all levels.
And if you think that my action won't count, think all the time that your action is one, but if you multiply 8 billion people
every day
and 8 billion people, that will be transformation.
Yeah, and at board levels and everything. Just if you don't know where to start, get in touch and we'll help. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.